Zerina Halouf thought she had found the love of her life. Rafiq Meirad made her feel like royalty until the wedding night turned into a calculated murder. While her bridal gown still shimmered under the bedroom lights, her body lay cold. Her groom vanished, and a secret USB she left behind would expose a chilling trail of deception, poison, and hidden identities. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a blueprint of betrayal. Zerina Halouf arrived in Dubai just 3 months before her wedding. A graphic designer from Beirut, she had met Rafiq Meirad through a luxury travel app where he appeared as a top-tier host for elite tours. What began as casual conversation turned into weeks of video calls, emotional messages, and then an unexpected proposal. Her friends were surprised at the speed, but Rafiq was persuasive, charismatic, and had all the trappings of wealth. He flew Zerina out first class, gave her a private suite at a 5-star hotel, and dazzled her with extravagant dinners and diamond-studded gifts. For a girl who had always dreamed of a better life, it was everything she imagined and more. Their wedding was nothing short of a spectacle. Set against the backdrop of Dubai's glittering skyline, the ceremony took place at an exclusive Palm Jumeirah villa surrounded by imported orchids, chandeliers suspended over the pool, and a guest list that included business moguls and influencers. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the designer lehenga Zerina wore to the personalized golden invitations embossed with both their initials. Dubai's elite whispered about the new couple, and even strangers online commented on how perfect they looked together. Zerina's smile in every photo seemed genuine. For someone who had built a life around modesty and dreams, this appeared to be the happily ever after she deserved. But the fairy tale dissolved before morning. Hours after the last guest left and the music stopped echoing through the halls, a call was made to emergency services. The bride had been found unresponsive in the bridal suite by hotel staff. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Zerina was declared dead at 6:17 a.m., still in her wedding gown, her hair partially undone, lying across the silk-covered bed. Her bouquet was crushed on the floor, and her phone was missing. No one could explain how a healthy 27-year-old woman had died so suddenly, especially without any signs of violence or distress. At first, everyone believed it to be a heart condition. Perhaps she had collapsed from stress, or an undiagnosed complication, but there were odd details. Her wedding ring was not on her finger. Her jewelry box was untouched, yet her engagement ring was also missing. The CCTV footage from the corridor outside their suite showed no visitors throughout the night. Only Rafiq was seen entering at 1:03 a.m. and never seen leaving. By the time police arrived, he was gone. The staff who had interacted with Rafiq that night described him as calm, even too calm. He had ordered a bottle of imported wine shortly after midnight and requested privacy. Around 4 a.m., he had called the front desk, asking for a wake-up call at 8 a.m., but when they knocked, there was no response. Security opened the room and found Zerina's body, but Rafiq had disappeared. His car was still in the private parking area, but his passport was missing from the safe. There was no note, no signs of struggle, no known reason for the disappearance. Detective Omar Saeed was assigned the case. Known for his sharp intuition and ability to detect inconsistencies others overlooked. From the first glance, he felt something was wrong. The positioning of the body seemed deliberate, too staged. Zerina's fingers were curled around nothing, as if something had been removed post-mortem. Her lipstick was smeared just on one side, and there were subtle marks on her neck, not enough to scream foul play, but enough to raise doubt. The media caught on fast. A lavish wedding ending in death on the same night was too sensational to ignore. Headlines ran across the Gulf and beyond. Social media turned Zerina into a martyr of modern romance. Speculation grew. Some blamed culture shock. Others suggested Suicide, and a few whispered about Rafiq's mysterious disappearance being the key. But nothing was certain. As the sun set that evening, the image of Zerina in her bridal dress, smiling at the altar just hours before her death, circulated online. With a haunting caption, she thought it was the beginning of forever. She didn't know it was her final goodbye. Rafiq Meirad's disappearance became the focus of the investigation. Within 24 hours of Zerina's death, his phone was switched off. His financial accounts showed no new activity, and all attempts to trace his movements led to dead ends. His family, when contacted, claimed to be shocked. They told authorities that Rafiq had informed them he would be going on a spiritual retreat for a few days to purify his soul before starting married life. The timing of that statement seemed too convenient, too rehearsed, and completely out of place given the circumstances. Detective Omar Saeed delved into Rafiq's background. While his public image showed him as a charming, successful businessman, operating a luxury concierge service in Dubai, his private records painted a different story. There were several red flags, especially in his time spent abroad. During a 6-month stay in London, Rafiq had been questioned by police in a major fraud investigation involving fake travel packages and embezzlement. Although he wasn't formally charged, he quietly returned to the UAE shortly after the inquiry. There were also unverified reports of a former fiancé in Spain, who had died under unusual circumstances just months after their engagement was abruptly ended. That death had been labeled as accidental drowning, but it now raised serious questions. The deeper Detective Omar looked, the stranger the puzzle became. Rafiq's businesses appeared clean on the surface, but they were structured through layers of offshore shell companies. His main office in Dubai was registered under a different name, and his primary business partner had gone bankrupt and moved back to Morocco years ago. Financially, Rafiq lived large, but his tax records showed modest earnings. His assets didn't match his reported income. This suggested one thing: he was hiding something, or someone else was funding his lifestyle through illicit channels. Meanwhile, Dr. Layla Navin, the lead forensic pathologist, completed her preliminary autopsy. Her findings were subtle yet disturbing. Zerina's body had no external injuries, but there were chemical traces in her bloodstream not consistent with anything she would have naturally consumed. Layla suspected a neurotoxin rare, slow-acting, and almost undetectable in basic toxicology. Scans: this wasn't a random occurrence, it was deliberate. Someone had poisoned her, likely during the wedding reception or shortly after she entered the suite. The symptoms wouldn't have been immediate, just a gradual weakening until her organs stopped functioning. The killer had counted on it appearing as a natural death. Back at the villa, forensic investigators combed through the suite for missed clues. There were no fingerprints beyond the couple's and the hotel staff. However, one item caught their attention: a faint residue on the rim of a crystal wine glass on Zerina's side of the bed. It wasn't present on Rafiq's. The wine bottle, although expensive, was not part of the wedding gift list. It had been ordered specially by Rafiq and delivered at midnight. This detail now became central to the case. Detective Omar now faced a timeline. Zerina was last seen by staff around 12:30 a.m., smiling as she returned to her suite. Rafiq ordered the wine shortly after. No one saw her alive again after that. The autopsy confirmed death occurred around 5 a.m. The poison would have taken 3 to 4 hours to fully affect her system. That placed the act directly within the hours she was alone with Rafiq. The motive, however, remained unclear. Zerina had no known enemies. Her family was middle class, not wealthy enough to suggest ransom or inheritance. But then, when police reviewed her recent financial activity, something stood out. A new joint bank account had been opened 2 weeks prior. Both Zerina and Rafiq were listed as co-owners. Large deposits were made from Zerina's Lebanese savings account. Within days, the funds were transferred to a numbered offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account traced back to one of Rafiq's hidden companies. The evidence was building, but Rafiq remained missing. His passport hadn't been scanned at any airport. No immigration exit record existed. But then, a blurry surveillance image surfaced, taken from a private marina near Dubai Creek. It showed a man matching Rafiq's description, boarding a small yacht at 6:45 a.m., just minutes after Zerina was discovered dead. The yacht, registered under a false name, hadn't returned. Dubai police now believed this wasn't just a domestic incident. It was the beginning of something far more complex, a calculated, premeditated murder plotted under the disguise of love, with an exit plan already in motion. 3 days after Zerina's funeral, her best friend Marwa El-Zahra arrived in Dubai. Grief-stricken yet determined, she carried something that would change the entire direction of the investigation, a small envelope Zerina had mailed to her from Dubai just 2 days before the wedding. Inside was a USB drive, a handwritten note, and printed screenshots from Zerina's phone. The note simply read, "If something happens, give this to the authorities. Don't trust anyone, especially him." Marwa, unsure what to make of it at first, handed the contents directly to Detective Omar Saeed. What they found inside would unravel everything the public thought they knew about the relationship between Zerina and Rafiq. The USB drive contained over a dozen voice memos, journal entries, and photographs that Zerina had secretly recorded in the weeks leading up to her wedding. Zerina had grown suspicious of Rafiq shortly after moving into his apartment. Her recordings revealed how she had stumbled upon discrepancies in his stories, suspicious financial documents in his study, and late-night calls he would take in a language she didn't recognize. She had seen him change SIM cards, hide passports in a locked drawer, and once overheard him discussing something about clearing the account before June 10th. One particularly chilling voice memo stood out. In it, Zerina said, "I know he's hiding something. I found emails on his iPad he forgot to delete. They're not about weddings, they're about money, offshore transfers, companies I've never heard of. I think I'm being used. I'm scared to leave. If I disappear, it wasn't an accident." The screenshots showed bank notifications, conversations between Rafiq and unknown contacts about international transfers, and photos of passports belonging to different women, none of them Zerina. There was even an image of a jewelry receipt dated months before their engagement, addressed to a different woman in Bahrain. Detective Omar now realized this was far more sinister than a crime of passion. This was a pattern. Zerina had become another link in a chain of women used, manipulated, and discarded by a man who operated under charm and deception. The financial trail deepened the mystery. The joint account Zerina had opened with Rafiq had been wiped clean the morning after the wedding. The funds were routed through multiple shell accounts and disappeared. Every step had been meticulously planned. With this new evidence, the authorities requested international cooperation to trace the flow of money. At the same time, they began digging into Rafiq's known contacts in Dubai. One name repeatedly surfaced, Nabi Karim, a cousin of Rafiq's who had once been a business partner. Nabi had since distanced himself from the family, but was still living in a quiet villa in Al-Bars. When approached by police, Nabi was reluctant to speak. He claimed to have severed ties with Rafiq after a fallout over fraudulent real estate deals, but he eventually admitted something important. Months ago, Rafiq had contacted him asking for help procuring a rare chemical. Nabi refused, suspecting it was something illegal, and they hadn't spoken since. Meanwhile, forensics returned new findings. The wine glass Zerina drank from tested positive for traces of saxitoxin, a lethal neurotoxin extracted from marine organisms. It's incredibly rare, difficult to trace, and almost impossible to acquire legally. Investigators began searching local pharmacies and black market networks for any signs of purchase or distribution. One particular pharmacy in Sharjah flagged a recent sale of lab-grade marine toxin compounds, purchased using forged documents. Surveillance from the pharmacy revealed a man in a hoodie and glasses, partially obscured, but closely matching Rafiq's body structure and height. As the pieces fell into place, the media began speculating wildly. Public opinion turned swiftly against Rafiq. He was now no longer seen as a grieving widower, but as a predator who had used love as a weapon. The investigation had moved from solving a mysterious death to hunting down a carefully orchestrated killer who had prepared every step of his crime like a script. Interpol was now officially involved. An international alert had been issued. The name Rafiq Meirad was added to red notices across multiple countries. But as law enforcement prepared for the next phase of the manhunt, one question haunted everyone involved: if Zerina hadn't left behind those recordings, would anyone have ever known the truth? Interpol agents began working closely with Dubai authorities to track Rafiq Meirad. The yacht sighting in the early morning hours after the wedding had provided the only concrete lead since his disappearance. It had sailed from a private marina, without clearance and under a false registration, likely arranged weeks before. The boat was registered to a non-existent company based in the Seychelles, making the paper trail nearly impossible to trace. However, satellite tracking and Coast Guard surveillance eventually placed the vessel's path moving southward through the Arabian Sea, its signal going dark shortly before reaching international waters. Investigators began examining Rafiq's international connections. Several names linked to his shell companies operated from East African ports known for smuggling. One of these names matched a fixer connected to black market travel routes through Djibouti. Detective Omar Saeed, working with Interpol, suspected Rafiq had arranged his escape long before the wedding. The marriage was merely a final step in his plan to secure funds, eliminate the source, vanish. Meanwhile, a forensic team made another important discovery. Hidden deep within the U.S., Zerina had left behind was an encrypted folder containing financial spreadsheets. These showed transfers not just of her savings, but of at least 3 other women's accounts dating back 2 years. Each had opened joint accounts with Rafiq. 2 of the women were confirmed dead, one by overdose in France and another by carbon monoxide poisoning in Bahrain. At the time, neither case had been classified as suspicious. Now the pattern was undeniable. Interpol issued a formal red notice, and airports, seaports, and embassies in 10 countries were alerted. 2 days later, a breakthrough came when local authorities in Djibouti received a tip. A man using a fake Belgian identity had checked into a private beachside resort. The photo on the passport didn't match Rafiq exactly, but it resembled a digitally altered version of him. Surveillance confirmed it. Rafiq had changed his appearance, shorter hair, trimmed beard, different clothing style, but it was him. Authorities moved quickly. Before dawn, a joint task force raided the resort. Rafiq was arrested without incident. He was found alone, carrying multiple IDs, $15,000 in cash, and a hidden compartment in his suitcase containing a drive with offshore banking credentials. He said nothing to officers. No protest, no confession, just a quiet compliance that suggested he had prepared for this outcome too. Back in Dubai, the news of Rafiq's capture made headlines. Zerina's family in Beirut wept at the news, not with joy, but with bitter relief. Her friend Marwa issued a public statement thanking investigators and urging other women to come forward if they had been involved with Rafiq in the past. Authorities believed there could be more victims unidentified or silent who had been manipulated in similar ways. Rafiq was extradited to the UAE within 48 hours. Upon arrival, he was placed in a high-security detention center and questioned by investigators. Despite overwhelming evidence, he refused to speak. His lawyer submitted a plea of not guilty, but the prosecution's case was airtight. Every transaction, every digital footprint, every movement had been documented. The court date was set, and the trial was expected to be one of the most closely followed in recent UAE legal history. For Detective Omar Saeed, the case was a haunting one. He had seen financial criminals and violent offenders, but never someone who combined both with such cold precision. Rafiq's ability to live multiple lives, to create illusions of love and loyalty while plotting destruction, was unsettling. This wasn't just a con man or a murderer. It was someone who weaponized intimacy as a tool of control. As the trial date approached, media outlets prepared documentaries, interviews, and podcasts covering the rise and fall of Rafiq Meirad. But underneath the public interest was a darker undercurrent. How many others like him moved undetected? How many women trusted someone whose entire identity was fiction? The story wasn't over. But for the first time since that wedding night, there was hope that justice might prevail. The courtroom was packed as the trial of Rafiq Meirad began. Journalists from across the Gulf region and beyond filled the benches, while viewers around the world tuned into livestream updates. For weeks, Dubai had been holding its breath. This wasn't just about one man and one murdered bride. It had become a case that symbolized trust, deception, and the danger of hidden lives. Zerina Halouf's name was now known far beyond Beirut, her story echoing in every headline, every interview, every analysis. The prosecution built its case with surgical precision. They presented the contents of the USB drive Zerina had left behind, letting her own voice narrate the fear and suspicion that grew in her final days. Her memos and screenshots laid out a chilling timeline of financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and calculated control. The court heard about the bank accounts, the offshore transfers, and the digital links between Rafiq and at least 3 other deceased women. It was no longer speculation. It was a pattern of predatory behavior, masked behind romance. Forensic experts testified about the saxitoxin found in Zerina's system, the poisoned wine glass, and the deliberate staging of the crime scene. The video of Rafiq boarding the yacht, combined with his possession of fake IDs and offshore banking documents at the time of arrest, cemented the prosecution's argument of premeditated escape. Every shred of evidence pointed to a carefully crafted murder. Rafiq sat silently throughout most of the trial. Dressed in a plain suit, his previously confident demeanor was gone. He barely looked at the photos of Zerina shown in court, the smiling bride, the hopeful fiancée, the young woman unaware of the plan unfolding around her. His legal team attempted to argue that Zerina had suffered from undiagnosed mental health issues and that her own paranoia led her to misinterpret Rafiq's actions. But the voice recordings contradicted every word of that defense. She wasn't unstable, she was terrified, and rightfully so. Amma al-Zahra, who had delivered the USB to authorities, was called to the stand. Her testimony was quiet and composed, but powerful. She described Zerina's excitement about her future, her growing fears, and the haunting moment she received the envelope in the mail. She became the voice of a woman who no longer had one. Her presence in the courtroom reminded everyone that this wasn't just a case, it was a tragedy. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Rafiq Meirad was found guilty of murder, financial fraud, identity forgery, and intentional evasion of justice. The judge, known for his stern rulings, delivered a life sentence with no possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. No outbursts, no emotion from Rafiq, just the weight of justice finally settling. Following the verdict, Dubai authorities reopened several cold cases linked to Rafiq's shell companies and travel history. Investigators in Bahrain, Spain, and France requested access to the UAE case files. It was likely that Zerina's story had only scratched the surface of Rafiq's crimes. Zerina's family returned to Beirut with her ashes, choosing not to bury her in Dubai. They held a private ceremony in her childhood neighborhood, attended by hundreds of mourners. Her mother, who hadn't spoken to the press during the entire ordeal, finally released a statement. "My daughter believed in love. She trusted someone who wore a mask. But she left behind the truth, and the truth saved others." The wedding. Photos were never deleted. They remained online, reminders of how appearances could lie. In the weeks after the trial, support groups were created across the UAE and Lebanon to help women spot the signs of financial and emotional manipulation. In relationships, Detective Omar Saeed moved on to his next case, but Zerina's file never left his desk. It was more than just a job, it was a lesson etched into his memory. Evil doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it walks into your life wearing a tuxedo and holding a bouquet. Rafiq Meirad, once admired in elite social circles, would now spend the rest of his life behind bars, his name forever tied to betrayal, murder, and the woman who saw through him too late. Zerina Halouf's legacy, however, would live on. Not as a victim, but as a woman who exposed the truth. Even in death,